We're back for the preview show. Myself and the great man himself, Harry Powell. We're here to discuss yet another UFC Apex card that's taking place this Saturday night. We're going to handpick 5 fights and run through the rest of the card relatively quickly. Harry, how are you, good sir? Another UFC Apex card. They are there's a couple of good fights on this card. I'm not going to be rated or anything like that, but I mean, we're frothing at the mouth for the next UFC pay-per-view event. It's a massive one over in Abu Dhabi, and look, we got to get through these cards as well. The Apex cards, I mean, taking them or leaving, we spoke about that before. You kind of lose a little bit of magic when there's no crowd there, but there are some good fights on this card.
There are some good fights, and we'll obviously touch on them. I think, as we've said, whenever we see that there's a UFC Apex card coming, I think we have to lower our expectations, because there is a relatively well-defined hierarchy now as to what the UFC is going to offer, dependent on whether that UFC Fight Night card is out in an arena, in a city, in X place in the States, or whether we're looking at the Apex. If it's the Apex, I think we currently know what we're getting. And for an Apex card, names like Jennifer Maia, Viviana Araújo, the main event, obviously, Jonathan Martinez, Adrian Yanez, Michel Pereira on that card, Cameron Saaiman on that card, Darren Elkins on that card. Like, those are names that we know. Terrence McKinney jumping in on late notice. Like, that's a very, very stacked UFC Apex show. And so we absolutely can't be complaining too much. Not at all.
Absolutely not. Let's jump in, Harry, to the main event straight away. Sodiq Yusuff going up against Edson Barboza in the 145-pound division. Interesting stylistic matchup here. I just got a comment on Barboza's physique at this late stage of his career is ridiculous. Ridiculous. He's looking in sick shape. And I think it's a battle of the bodies here with Sodiq Yusuff as well, who's also a tank carry. I mean, I'm looking at this and I can see 8 ways of Edson Barboza getting the win, but I believe that would be at the cost of Sodiq Yusuff not going out there and implementing a game plan that could get Edson Barboza out of there. It's a real good test for Sodiq Yusuff going in against a veteran, and it'll be very interesting to see how he handles it. When you're matching these two guys up stylistically, how do you see it going down?
I don't like the fight. I don't like the fight because Edson Barboza's 37, and we've certainly seen the best of his days. I think Sodiq Yusuff is levels above Billy Quarantillo. But we'll move just slightly past that for a second and answer the question that you asked, which is the game plan is Sodiq Yusuff grapples, right? That's the game plan. Team Lloyd Irvin, whatever we think about Lloyd Irvin as a human.
Well, fuck Lloyd Irvin as a human.
100%. But we have to pass that away in terms of the coaching credentials and the skills with which he has imparted into Sodiq Yusuff. And a lot of those are grappling skills, right? A lot of those are Sodiq Yusuff's ability to control people on the ground, land damage, and submit people. Fine. We know that Edson Barboza, if you stand for too long, has wicked kicks, really, really clean hands, lovely clinches, and just an all-round very technical, very powerful striker. And so what do? We take him down. That's what Bryce Mitchell did. That's what Khabib Nurmagomedov did back in the day. Like, if you're Sodiq Yusuff and your aim is to go out here and stand and bang, solely stand and bang, it's foolhardy. The answer is to go out, and the answer is to make it an MMA fight. Because the more that you threaten, and we say this almost every week, the more that you threaten things like takedowns and clinch exchanges and these sorts of things, the more that strikers are going to have to be more defensively aware with their footwork, and they're going to have to choose their weapons very, very wisely. And so if I'm Edson Barboza, on the other hand, I am shattering Sodiq Yusuff's legs as early as possible. I'm landing right straight to the body, and I am making sure that I am always ready to down block and fight for underhooks and clinch exchanges. But yeah, let me ask you this: if Sodiq Yusuff goes out and beats Edson Barboza by taking him down for 5 rounds and holding him there, what do we learn?
Well, we learned that he doesn't have an ego. That's what I think, because I think his ego is the only thing that's going to get him in the way here of him getting a win, because the blueprint is there to beat a guy like Edson Barboza, and that's take him down and put him on his back. And look at Sodiq, he's strong, he's powerful in the clinch as well. And I think he'll be able to outstrength Edson Barboza. Now, there will be some things he'll have to be wary of. He'll have to, I couldn't see Sodiq Yusuff jumping in for single or double legs, because you know what, you could get kneed straight in the face or uppercut straight in the face. What he's going to have to do is, apply a bit of pressure, a bit of forward movement, talking about a little bit of footwork and kind of trapping him, and then enter in with a body lock takedown. You want to clinch. That clinch will lead to a body lock. That body lock will lead to a takedown, and that takedown will lead to a win. And I think it's as simple as that, really, for Sodiq Yusuff. And if he doesn't do that, he could be in big trouble. He's not going to be able to cater to the stand-up game of Barboza, I don't think. He does have power, but he's been exposed a little bit on the feet, for lack of a better term, in other fights. And I think this is a fight where you don't play around too much, because if you do play around, it could lead to big trouble with a guy that still carries some good power in Edson Barboza. Would you agree?
I would agree. I mean, I think the exposure came at the hands of Arnold Allen, which, what are you going to do? Like, that's a guy that really should have fought for a title by now, but due to really Arnold Allen's own failures on the microphone and otherwise, he has not fought for a title, and so these things happen in MMA. But I certainly think there's no shame in losing that fight. Specifically, it was a close enough fight, close enough 3-round decision, so that's fine. But Sodiq Yusuff, he's coming off a win against Don Cháirezvs, who is not really on the level of Edson Barboza, and certainly in terms of legacy. So as I said, I'm not a huge fan of the fight, but I agree completely with you on the ego point that if Sodiq Yusuff goes in, and look, it may be that he goes out and lands a big right hand, and Edson at 37, cutting down to 145, the chin's just not there. You say it all the time. Shawnee says it all the time. One day your chin goes, and when it goes, it's when you least expect it, and when it goes, it's gone. And so, we've seen Edson take some hellish shots over his career too. And it might just be that Sodiq goes out and finishes him with strikes. But the safe and smart game plan here is to make this an MMA fight. And if Sodiq does that, fair fucking play to him.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that sentiment. And yeah, I mean, about the main event itself, it doesn't really do any great things for me from a matchup perspective. And look at it, Sodiq trying to cement his status as a ranked fighter at 145. So it'll be interesting to see how he does it. I think it's more of a test for Sodiq Yusuff of his mental strength and being able to go out there and implement a game plan in order to get a win, even though you might substitute a little bit of entertainment. That you've got to do it, and you've got to fight smart at times as well, especially when you're in his position. There are times, and I like guys taking risks, but I can understand him not taking any risks in this fight. I mean, you go out there and you get a first round submission or something over someone like Edson Barboza. I mean, that people are going to be talking about you. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that fight. That is your main event. The co-main event, we're just going to touch down on just slightly. Jennifer Maia versus Viviana Araújo at 125. Look, we're not going to really focus on this all that much. Maia's coming up the rankings again, having won her last 2 fights. She'll have a stern test. A decent enough fight or two on her day, Harry. Not too much to really say about this fight.
It's physicality versus a rising technical ability late on in Jennifer Maia's career. If Maia can make this a mixture of takedown and clinch, she'll win. And if Viviana Araújo can keep the distance and land her big power, she will win.
Absolutely. Let's focus on the next fight. Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez. And oh my God, this fight is absolutely ridiculous. Two similar enough kind of stylistic fighters coming in here, Harry. Look, I was and I still am very high in Adrian Yanez. Obviously took a loss to Rob Font, went up and fought a more experienced guy, a guy who's been steadfast at the top of the rankings at 145. Didn't go his way, had a brief moment in that fight, but ultimately got caught and got finished. And now he comes in against Jonathan Martinez, who himself has looked really good since he's moved down to 135, is riding a 5-fight win streak, recent wins over Cub Swanson and Said Nurmagomedov. has led him to this fight with Adrian Yanez. And this is going to be a fight, Harry, that is going to tell us who's going to get another little push up the rankings if they can come away with a win. How do you see this fight playing out stylistically? Fantastic matchup.
Absolute fucking fireworks is the answer. I think Jonathan Martinez is far much more of a kicker than Adrian Yanez is. Adrian Yanez will sit down on a couple of low kicks now and again, but is a very handsy, boxing orientated fighter and looks beautiful when he does it. I think the Rob Font, one of the reasons why I'm so interested in this fight, because the Rob Font loss teaches you something. We know that the guys from the New England cartel can box. We know they can, right? We know that they might not be the best boxer in the UFC, hashtag Max Holloway. But what we do know is that both of the guys, the main and prominent guys, which are Rob Font and Calvin Kattar, they both are very handsy fighters, very boxing orientated, really, really good straight shots, a fantastic volume, great cardio, all of these sorts of things. Adrian Yanez goes in and tried to fight fire with fire and got caught. Fine, these things happen. What happens now? Right? What happens now when he comes in against a very, very, very good fighter in Jonathan Martinez? Is he able to adapt to a style that tries to take Jonathan Martinez out of his rhythm? Is he able to negotiate a different style for himself, right? Or does he just go back to the rinse and repeat of I'm going to believe in my skills, I'm going to believe in my own game plans, and I'm going to stick with the same version of myself? I feel like Jonathan Martinez can come in here and offer some really interesting new wrinkles himself, but it's Yanez that I'm really looking at because he had his first taste of elite level competition and it didn't go his way, and that's fine, right? He's 29 years of age, so there's absolutely still time. But if the time is going to come, it's going to come now. And if the changes and the adjustments and the movements in his game are going to happen, they have to happen now and they have to happen quickly. And so I am so excited for this specific fight. It's going to be absolute flames.
It sure will. And I always say it on here, Harry, it's like there's nothing more that I enjoy as seeing a guy. Look at you. You can coming back from a big loss like that, where you have to reassess things. And I'd be thinking that we're going to see a kind of a fired up, flamed Adrian Yanez. And he's going to come in and he's going to be confident in the fact that he probably doesn't believe, and I don't believe that Jonathan Martinez has the power in his hands to cause him any great danger, the same as what Rob Font has, just serious power, and you can't make any mistakes in the pocket. Look at Yanez is not one to go in there and leave himself open in the pocket, but if he does, if there is a little bit of slip, I don't think he will be as punished as hard as what he would have been against a guy like Rob Font. Now, Jonathan Martinez, he has like wicked power. He has in his leg kicks. He's stopped fighters with calf kicks. I believe to counteract that, you want to close the distance. You don't want to fight from the outside against a guy who's going to be looking to kick your calf, especially a guy like Yanez who does have a wider stance and does like to kind of sit into his punches as well. Sometimes you can just take one of those calf kicks and it can completely mess you up and take away completely any game that you're trying to offer in there. But yeah, this is fight of the night really written all over it, Harry.
Easy. If something beats this for fight of the night, we have had some fucking fireworks on this card, and fair play to them, whoever it is that beats this for fight of the night.
Absolutely. Look, speaking of fireworks, Harry, Michel Pereira is making his middleweight debut. Obviously, he had the big weight miss and pulled out of his last fight, which was supposed to be at welterweight against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Has had a slew of cancelled bouts at welterweight, and it only made sense. Obviously, you're definitely not going to disagree with me about a guy moving up in weight class. And there's a level of excitement around this because we're going to be dealing with Michel Pereira, that's not worried about his gas tank, who hasn't been worried too much about weight cutting, although I do feel he's a big guy. He still will have to cut a little bit of weight to get down to 185. But he's coming in here against short notice opponent Andre Petroski. Andre Barrio was forced to pull out, unfortunately. That would have been a great fight but obviously it's not taking place right now. Petroski is the guy who's coming in after a win over Gerald Meerschaert. And you know what? He's got a set of nags on him, Harry, for coming in on short notice to take on Michel Pereira at middleweight. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Petroski can wrestle. He hits hard and he's a bit of a brawler. And so if I'm Petroski, this is a win-win fight for me, really. If I go in and I'm able to implement my grappling and I'm able to put Pereira down and hold him down, well, I'm gonna do just fine, right? And then I can say, sure, look, I took this fight on short notice. I went and beat your guy. Give me X fighter, whoever it is, right? Give me a bump up, give me a test, give me the name that I deserve. If he goes in and loses, well, 2 weeks notice, a week's notice, whatever it is, and it's Michel Pereira. Like, what do you want me to do? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, certainly no qualms on the side of Andre Petroski. For Michel Pereira, obviously, once and always, fuck weight cutting, but for sure, Michel Pereira is still cutting significant weight. Like 15 pounds is a lot of weight. It's 7 kilos. That is a lot of weight. But without a shadow of a doubt, I can't remember specifically what his last fight was, or who he was fighting. It was, Santiago Ponzinibbio. The size of Michel Pereira in that fight was absolutely insane. And so, yeah, like, don't get me wrong. We absolutely needed to see him at middleweight just because of the size discrepancy and clearly how much he was cutting. But equally, the way to beat somebody like Michel Pereira is kind of written too. It's difficult, but it's kind of written. And that's a big ask for somebody like Andre Petroski coming in on short notice. And equally, you've already iterated it, but I'll just very quickly say it again. A Michel Pereira with no weight cut or a very, very, very different weight cut is a very interesting prospect. Doesn't have to worry about the gas tank as much, doesn't have to worry about the damage as much, can go out and be himself again. That's interesting.
It is. It's interesting to see, the fight with Barrio meant that, we're not going to be messing around too much with Pereira at 185 too. They're throwing him in there against a guy with a couple of wins under his belt and a pretty known name at this stage at 185 pounds. And a guy who's coming up from, he has a ranked position at welterweight. He'll be looking to insert himself into the rankings, but, he can put a good run here at middleweight too, a middleweight division that, that's striving for people to kind of come up and fresh new names as well. But is Pereira a guy that likes to be the bully? Does he cut that much weight because he wants to impose his will on his opponent? So he's not going to have that luxury. Well, you might have it to maybe a lesser advantage than what he would have had at 170. We don't know. We'll see that on Saturday night. But, if he can put a few things together, there might be a run for the title for Pereira at 185. I mean, he's going to need to pull off a couple of stops, but this is going to give us a kind of a surefire kind of opinion coming into the breakdowns next week on the future of Pereira. Would you think, or I know you don't like to kind of speculate all that much, but from what you've seen so far of him at welterweight, do you think there might be a little bit of a run? Or I know maybe I feel he definitely has the capabilities to insert himself into the rankings, but it's a different story getting into the top 10 and then the top 5. Where do you feel his Pereira's ceiling may be in the middleweight division?
15 to 10, 15 to 8, maybe. Middleweight is a shallow division at the best of times. And I do think that there is a stark gap between champion and 3. There is a stark gap between those 4 fighters and everyone else in the division. So can I see him inserting himself in the rankings? Without a shadow of a doubt. Like, without a shadow of a doubt. Can I see him making a run for the title? Maybe. Again, this is dependent on the matchups that we see him in, the performances he pulls. Fighting bigger guys is a very different prospect. Those extra 15 pounds are huge, especially when you've got guys like Joe Pyfer, who is a gigantic human and is making 185 and looks insane in there against guys who are already freak humans like Al Hassan. So, we'll see what the future holds. But I think, like Johnny Walker, one thing that Michel Pereira realized early enough is that just mad bastardry doesn't win you fights. There has to be a level of technical proficiency. And if Michel Pereira comes in here at middleweight and falls back in love with the mad bastardry, he will not make it as far as he can.
Couldn't agree more. Very good assessment there, Harry. And we move on to the next one, a rematch between Edgar Cháirezvs and Daniel Lacerda. This was a fight, Harry, that was stopped. Lacerda. I told you I was going to get that wrong, didn't I? I told you before. I was like calling him the right name. That's typical Ian O'Neill, but whatever. Look at this fight was stopped. This is at 130 pounds. This was a rematch of a fight that was stopped prematurely. A no contest because the ref came in where he thought he saw a tap to a guillotine choke, if I remember correctly. Well, it did not happen. Yes. Yeah, probably was. But yeah, we get to see it again. This happened just a month back. They're redoing this again. They're making it happen quickly enough. It's not at 125 pounds. At least they didn't make them cut the full weight again, with it being so close together. But it'll be an interesting one. It was a good fight before it was stopped prematurely last time, and it'll be interesting to see how this one goes down, Harry. How do you see it playing out?
Probably very similar, right? Both without the referee's intervention, hopefully. But like both these guys are action fighters. Cháirezvs is a guy that has that level of mad bastardry in him and that he jumps on guillotines. Daniel Lacerda equally either gets finished in the first round or does finishes in the first round. And so it will be fun. It will be exciting. Again, this is a 125-pound fight. I know it's not. It's at 130, but these are two 125-pound fighters. And you chuck any of those fellas in that division together and you're going to have a cracking fight. So yeah, I'm here for it without a shadow of a doubt. Hopefully we get a clean ending to this one, whatever the ending is. But I wanted to highlight this one solely because I just think both men are crackers, to be honest, absolute crackers. So
yeah, I mean, look at a little bit of a challenge here, possibly for fight of the night for Martinez and Yanez, but good matchmaking here. And, I'd be interested to see who, I'm struggling to remember. I didn't have a chance to watch back that fight. Who was it that was caught? I believe it was Cháirezvs.
Was the one who was attempting the guillotine on Lacerda.
Yes.
Lacerda was deep in the guillotine, and I can't remember the ref, but the ref was asking Lacerda if he was okay. Lacerda immediately put his thumb up to begin with, and then a couple of seconds later, referee grabs Lacerda's hand, gets no response, jumps in, and Lacerda was immediately fine after. Immediately fine.
Yes, I was actually picturing another fight. I absolutely remember. This is the rematch from the fight that Chris Taglioni called a halt to a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and this will be interesting. I'd be interested to see this one play out. And credit to the two guys for getting back into the UFC for putting it back on. And yeah, we'll hopefully get to see a final result in this fight. Moving on, Harry, to the main card opener. And this is a fantastic fight. Look, we say it time and time again here. 135, it's almost impossible to put on a bad fight. And this one is not going to be a bad fight either. I'm very confident in saying that. Christian Rodriguez went in there, took out Raul Rosas Jr. in his last fight, looked massively impressive in doing so too. Just showed that there is levels to this, and Raul Rosas Jr. just wasn't at Rodriguez's level. Has been coming through and working his way nicely up through the 135-pound division, as has his opponent Cameron Saaiman, has been looking good as well. 9-0 undefeated, coming off a ground and pound win over Terence Mitchell. And this is going to be an absolute cracker. You know, UFC like to put these as the first fight of the main card to kind of set the tone for the rest of the main card, perhaps. This is going to be a complete barn burner.
I agree. I really, really agree. And I think this is risky matchmaking by the UFC in terms of it seemed as though they were on the Cameron Saaiman bandwagon. Christian Rodriguez, I think, is a slightly more developed fighter. From what we saw against Terence Mitchell, Cameron Saaiman got the job done, but he got the job done with a bunch of mistakes, with a bunch of inefficiencies. He still managed, and look, don't get me wrong, that is an incredible skill to be showing at Cameron Saaiman's age, which is to make a ton of mistakes and still be able to finish fights. Absolutely brilliant stuff, especially in first rounds. But Christian Rodriguez going out and beating Royal Rosas Jr. in the way that he beat him was very, very, very impressive. And that tells me a little bit something about his development right now. And so the UFC are asking big questions of Cameron Saaiman here. I think they're the right questions, right? Now's the right time for this type of fight. If Cameron Saaiman goes out and turns out to be 9-1, he has so much time to learn from these fights. And equally, you have somebody like Christian Rodriguez who can go in and pick up the name of Cameron Saaiman, add it to his record. And in the future, Cameron Saaiman will absolutely be there or thereabouts, right? I don't think this is going to be one of those things where it's a push too soon and, somebody like an Edmund Shabazian. I don't think it's going to be one of those types of stories. I think that the UFC have learned their lesson and will build these young fighters much, much, much slower. So it's absolutely a battle of the prospects at 125, and it's a screamer of a fight. Screamer.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It's like, I understand what you're saying where it's like a little bit unfortunate because one of these guys are going to lose, but we're looking at Saaiman, who's only 22 years of age, Rodriguez 25. So even if you do grab a loss in this fight, you're going to have plenty of time to bounce back and recover. And I'm just excited to see it. It's just a fantastic matchup. Like you described it perfectly, between two great prospects. And I'm interested to see the development and how they match up with each other. So that kind of takes us through the main card. We're not going to focus too much attention on the prelims. I'll give a quick run through, maybe for your thoughts, Harry, on the prelims. First one we'll stop at is Darren Elkins coming back to take on downtown TJ Brown. How do you see that one? This is just going to be a typical kind of mad fight that Darren Elkins is always in. And, at this stage of Darren Elkins' career, they're setting it up for a guy like TJ Brown, or maybe they're setting it up for Darren Elkins to come in there and get another exciting win, another come from behind win. Lost his last one to Jonathan Pierce, but what do you think about this one?
Why are we doing this? Why is Darren Elkins fighting? Like, there isn't, and we'll get there, right? I know I've spoke about this, but the Tony Ferguson Paddy Pimblett fight is sad to me. It's sad watching Tony Ferguson fight now, and I feel like similar is going to happen with Darren Elkins. I really don't need to see Darren Elkins someone. I really don't need to see it. I do not need to see him take an absolutely hellacious beating just to find it in his soul, that animalistic crying soul he has, to pull it out of the bag and turn somebody like TJ Brown around. Like, for what? For 50 G's? I don't need to see it. I don't need to see it. Fair play to him for getting in and believing himself and putting himself through the camp and doing the whole thing. Fair play to TJ Brown for taking such a tough fight in Darren Elkins. But me, as a fan, I care for competitive fights with fighters who are not even necessarily in their primes, but fighters that aren't so out of their prime that we are looking at what we're looking at. And Darren Elkins might go out and win, right? It doesn't really change my mind, though,
Oh, 100%. And that's fair. You're entitled to that opinion. I completely understand where it comes from as well. But, it's just this competitive nature in guys like Darren Elkins where they don't want to stop. And, he doesn't want to stop. He wants to fight. The UFC will cater to his needs. And look, let's be real. What's the option? Well, UFC shouldn't put this on. If the UFC didn't have him anymore, he'd go find a fight somewhere else. So look, this is they're not throwing him in there against a young buck. They're throwing him in against TJ Brown. Well, I mean, TJ Brown is not really a young buck. He has a fairly patchy record as well. So, I like this match making because of that fact. But look, it'd be interesting to see what happens anyway. Tainara Lisboa takes on Ravina Oliveira at 135 pounds on the prelims as well. Terence McKinney takes on Brendan Marotte at 155. McKinney back in action again, always is in exciting fights. Arina Alexieva takes on Melissa Dixon, undefeated Melissa Dixon at 135 in the women's division. We see Chris Gutierrez is back in there, obviously taking off last week's card due to the late pullout of his opponent. He comes in against Atalang Haley. I like Chris Gutierrez. I think that's an interesting fight for him. Credit for taking another fight at short notice, still at 135 as well. And Ashley Yoder is back against Emily Ducoy. Ashki Yoder at 8-8. That's crazy. I haven't seen her name in a long, long time. Harry puts his head in his hands and we get the swipe of death. So that's what we will do. That takes us through the UFC card. I'm going to throw a curveball at you here, Harry. I didn't discuss this before, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, I've shared my thoughts already on the big Cage Warriors 161 main event. That's Paul Hughes versus Jan Quaeyhagens. Very curious to hear your opinion on that fight. Very good fight taking place at the RDS in Dublin this Saturday.
So I think I can come at this from a couple of different angles. From a media's perspective, I do find it difficult to quantify why Paul Hughes is taking a fight at 155, because he is right there or thereabouts, 145, the title, everything else, on the cusp of the UFC, putting yourself in. If you're doing a double champ thing and you want to do that, fine, no problem. We've seen it done, whatever, grand. The 155 fight against Jan, can you pronounce his name again?
Jan Quaeyhagens.
Quaeyhagens, thank you. Against Jan Quaeyhagens, we've seen Jan Quaeyhagens a number of times under that Cage Warriors barrier, and he's a good.
But this guy is no joke. He has
Absolutely.
100% finishing rate. Look, a very dangerous guy, if not the most dangerous guy outside the champion, in my opinion, at 155 right now. So, yeah, please continue.
Right. So for Paul to take that fight, does that bolster his UFC chances? I'm not sure it necessarily does, because the UFC doesn't have Jan Quaeyhagens on their record, I imagine. And if they do, I don't know that it's necessarily going to tip the scales from conversations that he's already had with the UFC. Is it that Paul wants to stay active, wants to keep his winning streak going, wants to do all this stuff, wants to maybe put himself in the shop window for the 155-pound title? Maybe. From a fan's perspective, though, I am fucking salivating. Absolutely fucking salivating. Paul Hughes is never in a boring fight. Paul Hughes doesn't know how to be in a boring fight. Paul Hughes is a modern day mixed martial artist. He blends absolutely everything together. He is at an age, what is he now, 26?
Yeah, in around that, I think.
Something like that, but in a perfect age where his skills and his athleticism and his prime physique are starting to meld together. And I'm excited to see him at 155 with no weight cut. I do think he's going to be a little bit small for the UFC's 155-pound division, if and when he decides to go to the UFC. But both slick strikers, both slick grapplers. I do think that Quaeyhagens probably has a little bit more of a submission potency from what I've seen of his previous performances, but Paul Hughes is not a guy.
I think Paul Hughes can dominate him in the grappling, Harry, to be honest.
That's not what I said, though.
Okay.
Submission potency. My next line was going to be exactly that. That Paul Hughes' ability to dominate positional grappling exchanges is unbelievable, especially in the scenes that we've seen him in the fights we've seen him in. I don't think Quaeyhagens gets anywhere near a submission. Anywhere near. Paul Hughes' scramble ability, his ability to find chest to back, his ability to keep head height, keep hip height, and to just constantly rag on fighters is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So from a fan's perspective, I'm really interested to see what the size difference is like. I'm really interested to see what Quaeyhagens is able to ask of Paul Hughes on the feet in the wrestling exchanges. Very, very, very interested. Obviously, Paul Hughes is a drastic A-side, and I will be picking Paul Hughes to win the fight, but by no means is this a walkover for Paul Hughes. Jan Quaeyhagens is a good fighter,
Yeah, just to touch on the decision to fight at lightweight, based off what I was hearing off the interview with Shawnee and stuff, was more so a timing thing. Was that the fight was kind of put together? They were waiting to maybe see if that call was going to come in, and rather than not fight at all, he chose to kind of not cut the weight, which allows him to fight. And I think at this stage, he's got to fight, Harry. He's just got to get in there and fight. And this is a risky fight. I agree with you 100%. And Jan Quaeyhagens is no joke, and I'm very excited to see how Paul Hughes does. If he goes out and blows Jan Quaeyhagens out of the water, I mean, Christ Almighty, we're in for a special one. But I would imagine if that UFC comes a call and it'll be back down to 145 for Paul Hughes, and that wraps us up really for it. I'm very looking forward to that. We won't spend too much time talking about the rest. The lads did a preview on the big podcast. We'll do an extensive preview on the Owl Triangle this week on the Cage Warriors 131 card. We speak to Graham Boylan, Paddy McCurry, and Solomon Saaiman, on that podcast. And Andy has another couple of interviews over there on the YouTube channel with everybody on that card as well. We look forward to it. We'll probably break down maybe a couple of fights ourselves next week as well, along with the UFC. Maybe we'll give you an extended balance breakdown version and cover a couple of the standout performances on that Cage Warriors card too. Me and Harry will go into negotiations about that off camera. But until then, we shall return next week. Go over there and follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell and myself, O'Neill at MMA. Enjoy the fights. Big sporting weekend this weekend. Big fight in Dublin. Another big event over at the UFC Apex. Enjoy it all. If you're going to the event, have fun. Take care. We'll chat to you next week.